The light at the end of the road wasn't from a street lamp. It wasn't from a house either. There were no houses out there. Just a single warm bulb hanging over a wooden door, glowing under a banyan tree that shouldn't have been growing where it was. This was the third hour of a drive that should have taken one. The GPS had promised a shortcut, 15 minutes saved, and I'd believed it the way tired people believe things at 8 in the evening when they haven't eaten since lunch. My name's Nat. 3 years ago, I was working as a management consultant out of Bangkok, and the client I was visiting that month was in Ayutthaya, the old former capital, 2 hours north, the one foreigners visit for the ruined temples. I went up there once a week. I knew the main highway, the Asia route, the way you know the back of your own hand, wide, well-lit, boring. That night, I didn't take it.
I had finished late. The sky had gone the kind of black that happens out in the country. No moon, no stars, just the dashboard glow and the headlights ahead of me eating about 30 meters of cracked asphalt at a time. The GPS lit up with a suggestion, a side road through the rural districts, 15 minutes faster. I tapped accept. The first thing that changed was the width of the road. 2 lanes became 1.5. The asphalt got rougher under the tires until I could hear the texture of it through the floor. Then the houses ended. What replaced them was a wall, an old temple wall, what we call a wat, running along my right side, orange brick that had sat through 40 monsoons. In the dark, it looked less like architecture and more like the back of something asleep. I tried the radio. The station I'd had since town just hissed. I tried 2 more. All the same. There was something in the air out there that didn't want my frequency. I turned it off.
That's when my stomach reminded me I hadn't eaten. I started scanning for any sign of a shop, a 7-Eleven even. Out here you sometimes see them at the mouth of a soi, those little side streets that branch off the main road, a single fluorescent sign humming over a stretch of nothing. There weren't any. There was just the wall on my right, banana groves on my left, and ahead the road bending into a sharp curve I almost didn't see in time. The headlights swung. They caught a wooden signboard, hanging crooked, faded. No restaurant name on it, just the words for made-to-order food and an arrow pointing into a soi I would not have noticed if the sign hadn't been right at the apex of the turn. The soi entrance was right next to the temple gate. I sat there with the engine running, idling on the asphalt, 2 voices arguing in my head. One of them said, "Keep driving. The highway is fine. You can eat in another 20 kilometers. The other one said, "You're starving. Your eyes are stinging. There's a sign right there." The starving one won. I turned the wheel and pulled in. The branches scraped along both sides of the car immediately. That should have been my second warning. Nobody who runs an actual business lets their access road close in like that. I went about 50 meters before I saw the light, and that's when I knew this wasn't a 7-Eleven kind of place. The light wasn't fluorescent. It was warm, that yellow you only get from old incandescent bulbs or from one of those pressurized lamps farmers use in the fields. It was hanging from the eaves of a 2-story wooden house, dark with age, leaning slightly under the weight of the banyan tree that had its roots wrapped halfway around the corner of the building.
Everything was quiet. I mean, quiet. The radiator fan on my car was the loudest thing for 100 meters. I parked on the dirt clearing out front, cut the engine, and the moment I cut the engine, the air around the car got colder. I want to be clear about that. The temperature didn't drop because I was now outside the climate-controlled car. It dropped because the air at that restaurant was colder than the air 10 meters down the soi, the kind of difference your body registers before your brain does. I rubbed my arms without thinking about it. I opened the door, and the first smell that hit me wasn't food. It was old wood, damp earth, and the faintest trace of incense, thup, the kind they burn at shrines, coming from somewhere I couldn't see. I walked up to the door. Wood-framed glass, sliding panel, the kind every old shophouse in this country has. It looked clean, surprisingly clean, given the outside.
Through the glass, I could see movement. People inside. Customers. A relief for a second. I slid the door open. The wooden track shrieked. The moment I stepped through, every customer in that room turned their attention on me. But not the way people turn. There was no curiosity in it, no politeness. They were looking at me the way you look at a moth that's gotten into your house, like I was something out of place in their space, and they were waiting to see if I'd leave on my own. I counted 3 of them. A man in a faded white shirt at the far corner, hunched over a plate, eyes down. An elderly woman 2 tables over, sitting bolt upright, both hands folded neatly on her lap, not moving. And in the back, I could see the outline of someone else, but the light didn't reach far enough. I just slid open a door that screamed loud enough to wake the dead. Nobody had reacted. Not one head turned at the sound. The room was beautiful in the way that bothered me, antique. A display case along one wall held the old blue and white pottery, the Songkhalak kind they used to make in Sukhothai centuries ago. Faded paintings on the wooden boards. Every surface clean, too clean, like a place that had been preserved rather than lived in. I picked a table by the window, not because the view was nice, there wasn't one, just my own car 10 meters out, but because the window meant I could see my car. If something went sideways, at least I'd know it was still there. The chair groaned when I pulled it out. The owner appeared. I didn't see her arrive. I just looked up and she was standing beside my table, a woman in a dark sarong and a pale brown long-sleeve shirt buttoned to the throat. Her hair was tied back so tightly her hairline looked carved. Her skin was the white you only see on people who haven't been outside in a long time.
She smiled at me. The smile didn't reach her eyes. I'm sure you've heard people use that expression before. I'd heard it too. I'd never seen it. Until that night, I didn't really understand what people meant by it. Her eyes were just still. Not unkind, just nothing in them. "What would you like?" she said, and her voice was so quiet I shouldn't have been able to hear her clearly, but I could. Every syllable landed inside my ear like she was standing closer than she was. "Tonight we only have green curry with beef, or egg pulao." I ordered the curry, and water, no ice. She nodded once, slowly, and turned and walked back toward the kitchen. And I realized I couldn't hear her footsteps. Not a creak. The floor under me had groaned when I sat down. It made no sound for her. I tried to look casual, pulled my phone out, checked the signal. The one bar I'd had on the road was gone. No service. I lifted the phone up over my head like that ever helps, and while I was doing it, I felt eyes on me. I lowered the phone slowly. The elderly woman 2 tables over had raised her head. She was looking right at me now. Her pupils, I can't explain this well, they were the milky white of advanced cataracts, so clouded that I couldn't tell what direction she was actually focused on. She wasn't blinking. She wasn't speaking. She was just facing me. I looked at my phone screen. Black. I tilted it. Black. I pretended to scroll something on the dead glass. There was a soft sound on my table. I looked up. The curry had arrived. I hadn't heard her come back. The plate was just there, with a glass of water beside it, no ice. The green of the curry was a perfect pale green. The steam rose from it the way steam rises from any plate of food, except it didn't. I leaned closer and held my hand over the rice, the way you do when you're checking how hot something is. And it was cold, not room temperature, cold, like the air coming off the inside of an opened refrigerator. The steam was visible. The heat was not there. The temple bell rang outside. Just one note, long, deep, slow, the kind that hangs in the air for 10 seconds after it sounds. Ning.
In Thailand, a wat will sometimes ring the evening bell at sundown, but this was an old bell with an old voice, and it didn't sound like an announcement. It sounded like a confirmation. Every customer in the room moved at the same time. The white shirt man at the corner turned his face toward me first. Half of it looked normal, the half closer to the lamp. The other half, the half in shadow, looked wrong, like a watercolor that had gotten wet. The edges of his cheek and his eye on that side weren't quite where they should have been. His features blurred into the dimness of the room, as if the room was eating him. He smiled. The smile was wide, wider than smiles get when nothing's funny. And he said, very politely, in the same calm tone you'd use to compliment a meal at a friend's house, "The food here tastes the same as when we were still here, doesn't it?" I put the spoon down. I want to tell you I had a clever response. I didn't. My mouth opened and nothing came out of it. The spoon clinked against the rim of the plate, loud as a bell in that silence. He kept smiling. He didn't move. He was waiting. The lights began to shift. The warm yellow of the bulbs got dimmer and grayer, like someone was slowly turning a dial. The smell of incense I'd noticed coming in had been faint, almost pleasant. Now the bottom half of it was changing. There was wet earth in it. The smell that comes up out of a grave when you open it for the first time in a long while. The owner came back. She had a small tray with an old clay teapot on it. She set it down on my table without looking at me. She was looking out the window, past my shoulder, at the temple wall. "Have some tea," she said. "It's windy tonight. The air outside is going to be especially cold." The air outside. I was inside. I was already freezing in a sweat. And she was standing close enough to me that I could feel something. And it wasn't body heat. It was the absence of body heat, like standing next to a window in winter. I looked at the teapot. The steam from the spout wasn't rising. It was coiling, wrapping itself around the base of the pot like a slow snake, refusing to leave the table. I reached out and touched the handle. It was freezing. I jerked my hand back. I tried to speak. My voice came out so thin I barely recognized it. I said something about needing to leave, needing to settle the bill, having a thing I needed to get to. She turned. Her neck made a sound. It wasn't a sound a person's neck should make. It clicked, like dried leather pulling apart. She smiled at me again, and this time in the gap between her teeth, I saw a black stain, the kind of stain that builds up on something that hasn't been washed in years. "In a hurry," she said, "but you haven't finished. This was prepared specifically for you. Someone went to a lot of trouble." The auntie with the cataracts nodded slowly, like she was confirming the owner's words. Her face didn't move otherwise. The nodding looked wrong on a face that still. I felt the blood leave my hands. I looked down. I was going to grab my bag. I was going to put cash on the table. I was going to walk. And as I looked down, my eye caught the gap between two of the wooden floorboards. And in that gap, I saw roots, banyan roots thick as my wrist, twisting under the floor of the restaurant. And tangled in those roots, lit by the faint amber bleeding through the gap, I saw pale, round shapes, several of them. The shape of them was a shape I recognized. I want to be careful how I describe this part. I don't want to oversell it. They were the right size. They were the right shape. They had the right empty places where the eyes should have been. I looked back up, and the man in the white shirt was no longer at the corner table. He was sitting 1 meter from me, at the next table. I had not heard him drag the chair. His face on the lamp side was now also starting to thin. I could see the line of bone underneath his cheek when he smiled. He reached out a hand, and on the back of that hand the skin was the gray-brown of something that had dried. He touched the rim of my plate. The food I had been about to eat developed a thin layer of frost across the surface. In about 2 seconds, he spoke again, gently, almost kindly. "Eat what you ordered, brother. The person who cooked it would be hurt if you didn't." I want to step out of the story for a second. In Thailand, there's a category of ghost called a Pi Tai Hong. Phonetically, Pi Tai Hong. The angry, restless spirit of someone who died violently or unjustly, bound to the exact place of their death. They don't roam. They wait. And the longer they wait, the hungrier they get. I didn't know about Pi Tai Hong then. I do now. I tried to stand. I really did. My legs didn't respond. The air around me had thickened into something that felt almost like water. Every movement cost more effort than it should have. The owner whispered, "Pay for the food first." I reached into my pocket for my wallet on reflex. My fingers closed around something that was not a wallet. I pulled it out into the light. It was a fragment of an old orange brick, the kind they used to build temple walls 100 years ago. There was a smear of something dark down one side of it, dried. The smell was wet dirt and iron. I almost dropped it on the table. The whispering came again, from everywhere. "That's your payment for tonight." There was a mirror on the side wall of the restaurant, one of those old framed pieces that came with the antique decor. I'd noticed it on the way in, but hadn't paid attention. Now my eye caught it, and what was in the mirror was not what was in front of me. In the mirror, I was sitting at a rotted wooden table that was almost falling apart. The walls around me weren't paneled. They were charred. Burned posts, blackened to stumps. Piles of collapsed brick from the temple wall, lying around me on a floor that was bare, scorched earth. The customers I'd been sitting with were dark, hunched silhouettes, squatting on heaps of old brick. I jerked my head back to the room I was actually in. Walls intact, customers in place, the owner standing politely beside me, the plate of green curry on the table. But my brain had seen it. I couldn't unsee it. Above me, the ceiling creaked. Not the way an old building shifts, the way a tree shifts in a high wind. I looked up.
Banyan roots had pushed through the rafters, thick ones with strips of white cloth tangled in them, that thin white cotton that gets wrapped around bodies before cremation. Sai-sin, in some cases, phonetically sai-sin, the sacred thread monks tie around your wrist for blessings. Here it was something else, burial cloth, old enough to have darkened to gray. And inside the roots, twisted into them, was a shape. A long shape, hair hanging down. The shape of someone hanging upside down from the roof of the place I was sitting in. The hair was very long and very white. The voices started from every direction now, many at once, all saying the same word over and over. Pay, pay, pay. I lunged for the door. It didn't open.
I'd come through it 10 minutes earlier. I'd heard it shriek. Now I was throwing my full weight against the handle, and it was as if it had been nailed shut from the outside. I could see my car through the glass, exactly 10 meters away, headlights still on, but it looked like it was sitting at the bottom of a long tunnel. The distance had become impossible. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Not one set, many. The customers were standing up, all of them, without sound from their feet, without even the small whisper of fabric you'd hear from somebody adjusting a chair. When I turned around, they were forming a half circle behind me. Heads down, right hands extended toward me, palms up. The way a beggar would, the way someone collecting a debt would. I shoved my fist into the door. I shoved it again. The third time, something gave. But what shattered wasn't glass.
The whole wall in front of me crumbled, like it had been made out of brick the whole time, and the door had been a memory I'd been carrying. Orange dust everywhere. The restaurant rolled back like scenery in a theater. Behind it was a ruin. Just a ruin. A burned shell of a building leaning against the old temple wall. The wall itself half collapsed. Broken roof tiles in the dirt. The customers who had been blocking me were now dark, faceless smudges crouched in the ruins, the way you might see crows. The owner stepped forward. Her face had no skin on the side I could see. She said, without moving her mouth, "You ate. Now you pay." I don't remember running. I remember being on the ground. When my brain caught up, I was on my hands and knees in tall grass, real grass, wet under my palms. The smell I was breathing wasn't incense anymore. It was the smell of a Thai forest at night, that mix of warm soil and rotting leaves and something blooming far off that I couldn't name.
My phone was lying in the grass beside me, screen lit, calling. It was my mother. I want you to understand what that meant for 1 second. My mother lives in Bangkok. She rarely calls me late. The phone had been no service for 20 minutes. Now, with no warning, it was ringing, and the caller ID was the most familiar word I knew. I reached for it. A voice from somewhere behind me said, "Come and eat with us, dear. The food isn't gone yet." It was not my mother's voice. It was coming from the phone. I picked it up anyway. The screen was a mirror in that moment, black enough that I could see what was behind me reflected in it. And what was behind me was the owner of the restaurant, standing close enough that I should have felt her breath on the back of my neck. In the phone's reflection, she was looking right into the lens, smiling. I stood up. I forced myself not to turn around.
What I had been crawling through wasn't grass. Well, it was grass, but it was a thicket overgrown around the collapsed wall of a wat, not the standing wall, a wall that had fallen down. The bricks were the orange that brick is when it's been sitting in the rain for half a century. What I'd thought were scratches on my arm earlier, when something with claws had grabbed at me inside the restaurant, were thorn scrapes from a vine, the kind we call lep mu nang in Thai, which translates to lady's fingernails. Long, thin, red thorns, the same color as scratch wounds. I had imagined her hand on my back. The vine had been the hand. I checked my own hand. I'd been gripping something the whole time. I thought I was holding the brick. When I looked down, I was holding half of a human shin bone. Dry, old, with fresh red blood on it that wasn't anyone's but mine. I threw it.
In the half second it took to hit the ground, I had 4 thoughts at once. The first was, this happened. The second was, get to the car. The third was, the car was right there a second ago. The fourth, and this was the worst one, was the woman in the restaurant is right behind me, and I have not yet looked at her. I didn't look. I ran. The road I'd driven in on, it wasn't there. The packed dirt under my feet kept giving way to tall grass. My headlights, when I finally saw them again, were pointing the wrong direction. They were lighting up the side of the temple gate, which meant my car was facing a way I hadn't parked it. I made it to the door, pulled the handle, locked. My car has a keyless system. The doors lock automatically if the key fob isn't within 2 meters, which meant somewhere I had dropped the key. I patted my pockets. My right pocket had something in it, something hard and small.
I pulled it out and looked at it under the moonlight, which had not been there earlier and which I was very grateful for. It was a human finger, dried, curled, with an old gold ring still on it. The phone in my left hand lit up again, a text message from a number I didn't recognize. 3 words. "Did you leave the key on the table?" I looked through the driver's side window. My key fob was sitting on the driver's seat, the seat I had not been near for the last hour. Beside the key was a fresh plate of green curry with gray steam coming off it. And in the rearview mirror, sitting on the back seat of my locked car, was the woman from the restaurant. She was watching me through the glass. The smile, somehow, had gotten wider. I pounded the window. I didn't think about it. I just hit it. The glass should have rattled. It didn't make any sound at all. Fog was forming on the inside of the window, where her breath would have been, if she were breathing.
She lifted one finger. The fingernail was black and broken at the tip. She tapped, slowly, at the plate of curry on the driver's seat. 3 soft taps, the way an old auntie might tap a chair to invite you to sit. The smell came through the glass. It was not curry. It was the smell of meat that had been left somewhere damp for 2 days. Behind me, around me, shadows were standing up out of the ruins. I counted 10. Then I stopped counting. They were the wrong proportions for people. Some were too tall. Some were folded almost double, knees by their ears. Their bodies were the consistency of smoke. But their hands, their right hands, were extended out. Each one was holding a piece of broken porcelain, the same blue and white pattern I'd seen inside the restaurant. The voices started again, layered and overlapping, whispering. Pay. Pay us back. You took it. You took it. You ate.
I want to be honest. I was crying at this point. I was sitting against the side of my car and I was crying. And I was sliding my hand into my back pocket because that's where my wallet should have been. Except all that had been in my pocket for the last hour was a brick that wasn't a brick. This time, my hand found my actual wallet, the real one, the one with my actual driver's license and my actual 300 baht in cash, and a small folded paper packet, about the size of a thumb. I'd forgotten it was in there. My mother is religious. She'd put it in my wallet when I'd first started driving up to Ayutthaya for work. She'd said, "If you ever stop somewhere and you feel like you shouldn't have, hold this in your hand and ask politely." It was a small bronze amulet, a prakruang, phonetically prakruang, the kind Buddhist Thais wear on a chain or tuck in a wallet for protection. Mine was a tiny walking Buddha, about the size of the end of my thumb. I unfolded the paper. I pulled the amulet out. The second my fingers closed around it, warmth ran up my arm. I have no other word for it. Not heat, warmth. The way it feels when someone you love puts their hand on your shoulder from behind. I stood up. I held the amulet in front of me. I stopped trying to be quiet about it. And I said, I shouted into the wind. I didn't mean disrespect. I'm just lost. If I took anything that wasn't mine, I'll give it back. Don't hold this against me. I'm sorry. The bell rang. But this time it wasn't a bell. It was lightning. A single fork of it, hitting the old banyan tree behind where the restaurant used to be. The flash was hard enough to bleach the whole landscape white for a fraction of a second. In that fraction of a second, I saw what was really there. Not 10 shadow people, just collapsed pieces of an old chedi, those small bell-shaped funeral monuments you see grouped around old temples, knocked over, scattered around me in the brush. And in the back of my car, the woman was no longer a woman. She was a slow column of dark smoke, trying to leak out through the seal of the rear window. The lock clicked.
I dove into the driver's seat. I grabbed the key off the cushion. There was no plate of curry. There never had been. I pushed the start button. The engine caught. And the headlights revealed something that almost made me give up. The road wasn't where it was supposed to be. There was no road. There was a sea of yucca, that tall, sharp-edged elephant grass that grows over abandoned land in this part of the country. Higher than the hood of my car. The GPS on my dash said, "Searching for signal." I floored it through the grass. The blades scraped against the doors like 1,000 fingernails, and in the rear-view mirror, I saw 2 milky white eyes still watching me from the back seat. She said, "That key isn't yours." I looked down at the steering column. The key in the ignition was no longer my fob. It was an old iron key, rust-eaten, the kind you'd use on a wooden temple door from 100 years ago, tied to it with a strip of white cloth. On the cloth, in faded red lettering of the old style, were words I recognized immediately. Korng Song Ham Nam Ork. Property of the Sangha, the monks. Do not remove from these grounds. This is the part of the story where I figured it out. The brick, the key, the food on my fork. I hadn't been tricked into taking them. They had been temple property, things that belonged to the Wat. And I had, without realizing it, picked them up and walked off with them. The food on the cook's plate, a brick from the wall, a key from a door that nobody alive had unlocked in 20 years. In Thai folk belief, there's a rule, a very old one. You don't take anything from a Wat, a brick, a flower, a tile from a roof, without asking permission of the spirits who live there. We call them Jiao Thi, the spirits of the place. They don't usually mind. They mind very much when you act like they don't exist. I had been acting like they didn't exist for an hour and a half. The car had stopped. The dashboard lights were flickering. The cold from the rusted iron key was crawling up my fingers, up my wrist, into my forearm. Behind me, I could feel it in the way the seat cushion was sinking. Something heavy was leaning over my shoulder from the back. I closed my eyes. I stopped trying to start the car. I let my hands drop into my lap, the way you'd let them drop at the start of a prayer. I held the iron key in one hand, the amulet in the other. I made my shoulders go loose. And I spoke, out loud, to whoever was listening. "My name is Nathapal. I came to your place without asking. I ate from your plate without offering anything in return. I picked up things that belong here, and I carried them off. I didn't know. That's not an excuse, but I'm asking now. Please, let me return them, and please accept the merit I've made in my life as a gift to all of you. May you go to a better realm than this one."
In Thai, we call this tham bun, phonetically tham bun, the practice of making merit. You feed monks, you release fish, you donate to the temple. The merit you accumulate is real in this belief system. It can be transferred to other beings. It's what you give to your ancestors at funerals. It's what you give to spirits stuck in places they can't leave. I didn't say those words because I was afraid I was about to die, although I was. I said them because in the half second the lightning had lit everything up, I'd seen the truth of where I was. A burned-down kitchen, a woman who had died in there, trying to drag her customers out. People who'd been waiting 20 years for someone to acknowledge them. I felt the weight come off the backseat.
The smell, that smell of wet meat and burned cloth, was replaced in one breath by jasmine, the faint, sweet, slightly papery smell of a fresh puang malai, those flower garlands you see hanging on the rearview mirrors of taxis all over Bangkok. The iron key in my hand was no longer cold. It was crumbling, black powder. It fell through my fingers onto the floor mat of the car. The dashboard came back on. The engine started without me touching the button. The headlights swept forward, and there, in the beams, was not a wall of grass. It was 4 lanes of clean black asphalt, the Asia route, the main highway I had abandoned an hour and a half earlier. A blue road sign 200 meters ahead with the word Bangkok and an arrow. I looked at the back seat in the rearview mirror. It was empty. On the floor mat, where the iron key had been, was a small pile of black dust and a thin scrap of white cloth. The cloth had 2 faint red Thai characters on it, old style, hand-painted. Pon Kam, the result of one's actions. Karma. I drove home with both hands on the wheel and didn't turn the radio on. I got back to Bangkok at 4 in the morning. I didn't go inside. I sat in the car in my own driveway until the first gray of dawn started lifting the edge of the sky over the houses across the street. Then I got out. The first thing I saw was the side of my car. There were long parallel scratches running from the front wheel arch all the way back to the rear door. 4 of them. They could have been branches. They could have, but the spacing was the spacing of fingernails on a hand, and they were deep enough to show silver nettle under the paint. I went inside. I washed my face. The smell of incense was still on my fingers. I checked the wallet. The brick was still in it.
Not exactly the same brick, smaller than the one I remembered, but a piece of old orange temple brick with a smear of something dark on it, tucked into the slot where my ID card normally went. I tried to take it out and throw it away. Every time I looked again, it was back in the wallet. That morning, I called a friend of mine, Beam. We grew up together. He's from a village outside Ayutthaya. His family's been there for generations. I told him the whole story. I didn't try to soften it. I told him about the GPS, the shortcut, the restaurant, the owner, the brick, the apology, all of it. He was quiet on the line for so long I thought I'd lost signal. Then he said very carefully, "Nant, listen to me. That shortcut, it's an old road. They stopped using it about 20 years ago. The ground sinks. It floods almost every monsoon. There's no reason for anyone to drive on it anymore." He paused. "And the wooden restaurant beside the temple wall? That one I have to think about how to say." Another long silence. "It used to be there. It burned down in 1997. There was a big fire. The owner, the woman who ran it, she went back inside to try to pull her customers out of the kitchen. She didn't make it. Neither did they. They buried what they could find of her in the Wat next door. I asked him to take me back. We drove up the next afternoon. Bright sun, 1 o'clock, the kind of light that doesn't allow any ambiguity about what's in front of you. There was no restaurant. Where it had been was a patch of overgrown ground beside a half-collapsed temple wall. The banyan tree was still there, but it looked like it was dying. Its roots had pushed through the burned stumps of wooden posts where the walls of the building had stood. I walked into the clearing. Beam stayed in the car. He didn't want to come in. In the dirt at my feet, I found pieces of porcelain, blue and white. Sengkalak, the old kind. The same pattern as the plate I had been served from. On top of one of the brick piles was a small clay incense pot. 3 sticks of incense in it, still smoking. There was no one for kilometers around, and the wind was strong enough that those sticks shouldn't have stayed upright, let alone stayed lit. I took the brick out of my wallet. I unwrapped the tissue. I set it down on top of the pile, near the incense pot. I put my hands together. "I brought it back," I said. "I'm sorry I took it. May you all find peace." The temple bell rang. The same bell I had heard the night before. But this time it didn't sound cold. It sounded, and this is the only word I have for it, grateful. We walked back to the car. As I was opening the door, I noticed something tucked under the wiper blade. A single banyan leaf.
There was dirt smudged on it. The smudge was clearly the shape of 2 Thai characters, written by a finger that had pressed deliberately. Kapjai. Thank you. I haven't used that shortcut since. I still drive up to Ayutthaya for work sometimes. I take the Asia route every time. I keep both hands on the wheel, and I don't take exits I don't recognize. The brick in my wallet? I left it on the brick pile that afternoon. It hasn't come back. But every now and then, when I order green curry at a restaurant in Bangkok, the first bite tastes like wet dirt and old incense. Just for a moment, just for one swallow, then it tastes like food again. The pra krieng my mother gave me is still in my wallet. I haven't taken it out. I don't really know how to end a story like this. Most stories like this, the ones we tell in Thailand at night, end with a moral about not going where you don't belong, about showing respect to places older than you are, about not taking what isn't offered.
That's a true moral. It's been true for a long time. It was true the night I learned it. But the part I keep thinking about is the woman. She was a real person. She had a name once. She tried to save her customers, and the kitchen fell on her. And for 20 years, she'd been alone out there with the people she couldn't save, all of them waiting beside an empty plate for somebody, anybody, to come back and finish the meal. I wasn't supposed to be that person, but I was the one who showed up. And I'm fairly sure, that when I closed my eyes and said her name, I gave her something none of the other lost drivers who'd passed by had given her. I gave her permission to leave. That's what I have to offer you tonight. Not a lesson about temples, a reminder that sometimes the things waiting in the dark aren't waiting for revenge. They're waiting to be heard. That's where I'll leave you tonight. If this one stayed with you, the subscribe button is right there. I have more stories from over there than I should probably be telling. I'll have the next one ready by next week. Sleep with a light on.